Okay, this is Aleksey, part 1 of making a little yellow robot. Once again, this is what it looks like if you've forgotten. This is what our final product will look like, and this is the little drawing that I made. Just drew them up. That was a little thumbnail, and then I traced it on the computer and I got this. So we're going to put this little guy into the background. So let's go to our right view, and in Windows you can just grab this thing, you can just drag it right here and it's in the background. So let's go here, let's press Shift V, and that'll bring up our back section, and here we can modify its transparency, or if you want you can move it up to align the feet with the little blue thing, with the zero thing. It's always a good idea, I guess. So let's offset the Y up. There we go. Now let's start with a circle for the body. When you make a circle, your default circle might be different. I have it set to hexahedron, but the standard one is going to be good for this purpose. Usually I don't like the standard one, but in this case it's what we need. So let's rotate this guy on the axis here so that we have it pointing towards us. Scale this guy up a bit. And also, if you notice, see here we can see the wireframe, and here we can't. We can change that by going to Options, Display, and changing it to wireframe. And now we can see how much segments the sphere has. So if we increase it, we can see the segments. Now when we make the sphere here, we're going to be stretching it. And we're going to be cutting out like this section of it for the curved surface here. So let's rotate this guy a bit, and let's see if we have enough sections. I think at 12, the segments, I think that's a good value. So let's rotate this guy so he's perpendicular to it. Let's make him editable. Hit the scale key, stretch him out. Go to point mode, right click, get our brush, brush. Let's move him around a bit. Because this is probably going to be the line where our curve is, where our screen is going to be. So let's just shift this guy around a bit, because we're going to cut these polygons here. We're going to extrude them to get our screen, to get our front screen. So we're shifting them around in the point mode with the brush tool, just to make it meet up with our reference. And we want the center to be probably around here. It's not super important, but sometimes down the line this comes in handy to line things up when you're starting out. Okay, I think that looks about right. So let's get our polygons. Let's shift click on these guys as well. And we right click and we go inner extrude, and we click and drag it just a little bit, and then we press the normal extrude, so the D key as well works, and we click and drag, and then we click and drag again, just an empty space. As you hear, it's not really what we want, but once we put this inside a subdivision surface by holding the Alt key and clicking on it, you see we get our nice little window. And now if we have these polygons selected and we press the V key and we go select and grow selection, which is shortcut UI. If you can't see the shortcuts, it's in your preferences. You can turn this on so you can see the shortcuts. And we press UI again. Nope, that's too much. You can see that. So let's undo that. We need only the ones which are pointing out. And now we go into the Materials tab, double click, make a material, double click on it. Let's make this material black, call it glass, and now we can apply it. Just click and drag here onto selection while it's selected, and it'll automatically make a selection tag, and in the attributes it'll plug in the selection here. So this is going to match the name. So if we call this T1, it'll disappear, but if we put T1 in here, it'll appear again. So we have the glass here. So we got this window. Let's get our, if you're in R15, by the way, you can just stay in this mode, and you can go to Sculpt, Brushes, select this, Surface first, Sculpt, Brushes, example the grab brush, and you can middle click and drag to make it bigger. And let's turn on symmetry here. Nope. Nope. Yep, this one. Okay. And this really doesn't work. What is wrong with this mesh? World. There we go. So sometimes it doesn't work. We switch it to world, and yeah, there you go. Okay, so I want to move these guys. I want to move these points a bit out. So yeah, something like that. Maybe I want to make this whole thing. Let's go to Scale tool, scale it out a bit. Okay, good. Let's go to our side view here. Let's press Shift V. Let's make this thing transparent, just like 90%. And let's now grab our regular brush tool. Let's pull these guys out so it matches the lines. Because right now it doesn't. It looks too kind of, you can see the lines are way further out. Okay, that looks a bit nicer. This part doesn't really matter because it'll be blocked off. This part still needs a bit of, let's move these points up here. Yeah, it looks nicer. Okay, sweet. And while we're at it, let's make a new material. Let's just make it yellow. Give it a bit of darkness, just a tad. And let's apply it to the sphere. Don't forget to put it before the black because it applies this, and this applies only to the selection, whereas this applies to the whole mesh. So we've got the body here done. There's still something that I don't like. Maybe I think these curves need to be moved, adjusted a bit. Let's get this curve and this curve. Let's just drag them back a bit. And maybe this curve. Actually, just at this point. Oops. And this point here. And let's also just move them back a bit. I don't really like that little, yeah, that's nice, it's smoother. And here as well, we have the same issue. So let's get our edges. And this edge here, and let's just move them down a bit. There you go, now it's a smoother edge, it's not so sharp. I reckon it looks nicer. And just, like, this whole thing is all about really tinkering with, with getting this guy to look the way you want to look. There you go. Now it's a nice oval shape. Maybe this back here still needs... Let's go to the edge mode, select these guys, and let's just move them. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay, let's move on to the legs. Okay, let's move right along. Let's get blocked in our legs and stuff. So let's block in this part of the leg here. Let's make another sphere. This time I will use the hexahedron. I think that's the right shape for the sphere. Let's move it across. Let's make it bigger. Yeah, it's about the right size here. Make it editable. Let's go to our point mode here and use our rectangular selection tool. Now, if you notice, I use a rectangular selection tool from any tool. I just go and I select it like this. This is on your mouse. There's your mouse button 4 and 5, the ones that go back and forward in the browser. So yeah, basically if you go Shift F12, you can press here, MX2, that's the button, and it does an instant rectangle selection while you're holding it. It's really useful, so find that command and map it to something. So I'm going to select all these points. I'm going to use the scale tool, and I'm going to scale them down. Not all the way, just maybe to like 15%. And then I'm going to move them up. I'm going to select all these points, and I'm going to move them up as well. And maybe scale them down a bit more. And what this will do is now when we put this into a subdivision surface, this nice kind of flat leg. Let's go and select some more of these, and let's actually select all of these here. And let's scale them down all the way to make it a nice flat leg, and move it up. Maybe scale them out a bit. There you go, get a nice edge there. So this guy needs to be, let's go into our point mode and select all these points here. Actually, let's select these points here, and let's move them across. And now let's select these points here and right click and go to brush tool. And now let's move them here to match up to this edge. The reason I selected these points is because now we can't move these bottom points. See, if we clicked, we only move the selected points. So that's a useful little feature. So let's now go back to our move tool, select these guys. Let's scale them down to make the back side of the foot. Move it back here. You can go to the axis mode, and you can move this axis here, and then you can turn it off, and you can scale, and it'll scale from the position of that axis. So that's a handy little tip. I personally prefer to use this plugin called Transform. I've showed it in my catapult tutorial. I'll put a link in the description. Basically, if you go to Shift F12, it's Transform tool. You won't have it unless you install the plugin, and I have it shortcut to Alt-T, and I just press Alt-T, and I can scale like in Photoshop. So depending on which side I pick, that's the side that scales, and it anchors to the edge of the frame. So that's really handy in doing stuff like this. Okay, so that's our base of the foot. Let's scale this guy down a bit. Too wide there. Okay, now let's add this little edge. I want to make like an inset, kind of like this thing. Where is it? I want it to do something like this. I want to insert, and then I want to drag it in. The problem here is it's all kind of wonky because of the way this sphere is, so let's undo this. Let's not do this. I want to select these edges in the move tool by double clicking them, and use the scale tool. You just click and drag it to 0, and you hold the shift key and it'll snap to 0. And do the same thing with this one. Just drag it in and hold the shift key and it'll snap to 0. And now, you know what, I'm going to also, I want to get this guy, and I want to press my Alt-T transform tool, and I want to push him down so he matches. There you go. That's even a bit too much. Let's pull him up a bit. There you go. Now we go back to our polygon selection tool, and you know what, I am going to go to my move tool, V, select loop selection. I'm going to select, all of these guys. And now I'm going to press the I key to add a bit of a bevel, and then the D key to extrude inwards. It's good to extrude once a little bit, then once for the big thing, and then once again for the last piece. That way you get a nice sharp creases. Now as you can see here, we're running into some problems. That's kind of ugly. So let's undo this. Let's undo this again. We can also, what we can do is we can scale this guy, which in I think R14 introduced it. When you do an extrude in, if we turn off our subdivision, you'll notice that everything gets kind of squashed together, which isn't always great. But what we can do is we can use the scale tool, and in Cinema 4D, in the new versions, if you hold the control key while using any of the operators, it copies it, or in polygon modeling, it extrudes it. So if we control drag in an empty space, or control drag actually on this red anchor here, so in these two axes, you'll see that it scales it in and it doesn't extrude, like it copies it. Because if we don't hold the control key and we drag this stuff in, see there's no extra edge there. But if we control key, it'll create that edge, and then we control key again, drag it smaller. And now when we turn on the subdivision surface, you see we get nice clean edges, we don't get any of that ugly stuff. So, and this seems like too much space here, so let's deselect these guys. Holding a control key and your mouse button for rectangular selection, deselect this, control, unselect this. And by the way, if you don't know, you can switch between your last, whatever tool you're in. So if you're in the move tool, scale tool, if you're in the iron tool, if you hit the space bar, it'll switch back to the selection tool. And if you hit space bar again, it'll switch to whatever tool you were in. So that's how you notice if I switch sometimes from, you know, scale tool to a select tool, that's how I do it. So we've deselected that, good. So, whoops, where is it? Yep. Now we can move this in a scale tool, we can move this guy down. Oops, as you can see, that didn't work because we don't have that edge selected. So let's go UI to expand the selection. And again, let's control, oops. Let's control click this. What just happened there? That was weird. Let's just delete these for a second. Yeah, everything good. Okay. I was just checking if maybe there's some extra polygons in there. Okay, so let's go to point mode. It's the easiest way to do it. Let's go into our front view and use the selection tool to select all these points. And now we should be able to move them down. Yep, there we go. Sweet, so now it's not so high off the ground. Good, that's what we wanted. Now this leg here, I don't want this curve. So what we're going to do is we're going to do edge mode, and we have this edge selected, just in case. We can double click on it in the move tool. And we can right click and go dissolve. And now it's a nice flat edge. If you don't like how it starts curving here, by the way, Alt A switches between this mode and this mode. So let's turn off this guy. We need another edge here, so let's go. Actually, no, let's do it a different way. You know there's a knife tool, which is right click, knife, and if it's in loop mode, you can add extra loops. So, for example, if you see there's like a little curvature there, and if we click here, it kind of sharpens that edge up. But I'm going to show you how to sharpen on both edges. If you go to selection tool and polygons and you press UL, which is the same as V select, loop select, we can now just press the I key, which is inner extrude, which is here, extrude inner, and we just click and drag in an empty space. And as you can see, we get some equal cuts on both sides. So let's turn off HyperNode. So see there, we got the two edges. And there we have it now. Sweet, right? Okay, now the other thing is I don't like how these are slanting. They're not slanting the way I want them to. So let's get these edges here. It's not doing a loop selection. Okay, well, let's just select them by hand, just holding the shift key. There's not a lot of them. Also, it's a really nice tool. If you go V, select, path selection, and you basically click on the first one and you go, and you just click and drag and it'll select that path. Also very handy. So what we're going to do with this tool, with this edge, is let's try just moving it out. Nope, doesn't quite work. Let's scale it down, oops, scale it down the red and shift so it's flat. And now let's go to our Alt T selection box. Let's scale it up and maybe move it out a bit. That looks more like what I want it to look like. Yeah, except we forgot to mirror the other side. So we can mirror the other side very simply. While it's still in the center here, what we can do is we go to our point mode, we go K for knife tool, and in this case we can just use the loop cut, and we cut here, and then we use our rectangular selection to select all these and go delete, and then we hold the Alt button while we press the symmetry, and there we go, we have symmetry. As you notice, these points aren't exactly 0, so we can just select them and we can go X 0, and now they're connected. So now everything we do on one side of the leg will be done on the other side. Now also, I don't like how this face here seems a bit sharp. Let's move this guy. It's in this view here. By the way, if you have any tools selected, if you click in the empty space in one of the side views, you will move only in that axis. So in the empty space, let's move him back a bit. There you go, that looks nicer. Okay, good. Still a kind of squarishness that I don't particularly like here. Let's see if we can just get these points here and maybe shift them a bit. That looks nicer. Still, maybe these points need to be moved up a bit. Yeah, as you can see with the hypernubs, we actually lost our original position. So let's just select these points and shift them to match our reference pictures. Let's also scale these guys down. They shouldn't really be like that. Move them up here. Let's get back a bit. There you go. So yeah, always, never forget to use your reference. So we got our nice little foot here now. It's our head. Let's give it a yellow material. By the way, we can just, if you click on this material and control click and drag, you can just apply it to the sphere there. Pretty nifty. So next thing is we want to add these little blocks here. So let's just make a cube. Let's move them over here. Let's scale them down. Let's make them editable. Go to point mode. Let's move these guys so it's the right angles. And seems about right. Go back to the model tool. Now we could put this in a hypernode, but this new bevel tool in Cinema in R15 is just great. So we can just select all the edges, go right click, and actually no, even better. You can bevel with this tool, but the problem is that's destructive because once you've beveled it, like you can change the attributes here, you can change the amount of subdivisions, but then once you apply it, you're kind of stuck with this. So you have all these edges, and when you want to move something, like say we want to reshape it, so we go to point mode, we select this. The bevel angle doesn't actually change, it's still kind of like, it doesn't realize that it's been moved. So let's undo this. This awesome plugin called Chamfer Maker, this thing. And what it does is, it takes the edges that are selected, or you can set it to have an edge selection. But let's select these edges, let's go select and set selection, edge selection. And now we get the chamfer maker. We put this cube in the chamfer maker inside like a hypernubs, and it'll automatically bevel the edges. Obviously we have to change the settings here, so let's change it to like 1 and let's give it some subdivisions and untick this font break so it's all smooth. And there we have it. We have a nice bevel on the edges, but we still only have the 2 points here. So we can grab this edge and we can move it around and it'll dynamically bevel. It's a really useful plugin. Once again, go get it off C4D Cafe or Google it. It's all over the place. It's free. But see, notice the problem here. This is something to keep in mind. So we have this edge here, we have the chamfer maker. And as you can see, it's only one edge right now, not all the edges. We want all the edges, right? And then we go chamfer maker. And if we change this, it bevels all the edges. But what if we want to select edges and move them around? Well, that's why I made the selection tag. So if we get chamfer maker, and here we go process edges from live selection. We don't want edge live selections. We want edges from chosen selection sets. And then just drag the selection set in there. And there you have it. And you can move, you can select one edge and you can move it around and everything's still beveled. Oops. If you press undo. Sometimes it loses its... There you go. And it's back. And now let's make these guys a bit smaller. Nice bevel. Maybe move this guy up. Also, you'll notice this guy is currently in the wrong place. So what you want to do really is, let's take this guy out. Let's move them under the cube. Let's zero all these guys out. Now let's put the cube back in. We're going to increase it so you can see this bevel. There we go. So that's our front. So basically we do the same thing. We just copy this guy over to the back. Just control, click and drag. As I said, it copies it and rotate it around. Hold the shift key to quantize it, to snap it. Now I'll get our points. And as you can see, it's really easy to just move our points now. Let's move these guys across, right down, these guys here. Whoops. As you can see it really quickly, we have this, whoops. We don't have to worry about bevels and stuff, it just dynamically bevels anything. So definitely get chamfer maker. It's a free plugin, it's just super useful. Okay, next step, we need this little edge thing here. So once again, let's grab this guy, let's go to the move tool, control click and drag him here. Let's rotate it so it's a bit better aligned. Oops. Let's get our points, point mode here. Let's move these points around to where we want them to be. Now we're going to use a knife tool and it might screw up the chamfering. Might not, but let's check it out. Let's go to the knife tool, K, make sure it's in loop mode, turn off restrictor selection, and let's add some cuts here. No, it seems pretty good. Seems to contain it. And a cut here. Turn off snapping. I have snapping on right now, so it's kind of jumping. Good. And now in this side view here, we can move these points around and we can make it like we have it in there. As you'll notice, it's a bit kind of wonky now because it's not actually a hypernerve, it's just a chamfer. But we can just alt click and put in a hypernerve and there you go, we have a nice little smooth. Let's go here, let's move this point down here as well so it fits in, and this guy, move him across. There you go, and we have a nice little smooth object with nice little bevels. It's really handy. This new combination of the new bevel tool and this chamfer maker just makes making soft edges and stuff so nice. Like it's just great, and it's great because you can apply subdivisions on top of it, so it's smooth and it keeps those edges sharp. Because if we turn off chamfer maker, see, we get this weird blob and we have to go in and we have to use the knife tool and we have to add cuts, and and that doesn't always work, and sometimes it does, sometimes you get ugly cuts. But here you just go chamfer maker and ta-da, you got your bevel. Don't forget to turn off this thing here, which is Phong break rounding, because if you don't, you'll get these sharper edges which aren't really pleasant. I don't know why it's on by default. Obviously, if you find a setting that you like for a project with a chamfer maker, you can always go to edit and set as default, and every time you add a chamfer maker object, it'll have these settings. So anyway, there we go, we have our leg. Let's